This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hey guys, Sean Fay-Wolfe of Diamond X Studios here, and now that we've talked about both the 90s and the 80s on this channel, it only makes sense that now we move on to the 70s, the half-filled out Mad Libs page of the 20th century.
Love will keep us together.
Ah yes, the 1970s, an era where a hot new car looked like this, a flattering haircut looked like this, a trustworthy politician looked like this, an eligible bachelor looked like this, and children's television looked like this.
You big dumb stupid rotten monster! You make me so mad I don't believe it! You are without a doubt one of the nastiest monsters I've ever seen!
So, yeah, clearly not a confused time for pop culture in the slightest.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
I don't think it'll blow anyone's mind to hear that the music of a time period tends to bear some resemblance to the culture that spawned it, and so I guess it stands to reason that in 1975, the middle year of such a transitional decade, the music is just as transitional. By this point, all remaining remnants of the late 60s had been thoroughly purged from the musical landscape, and popular music for the past few years has been as chintzy and dorky as it ever has been, before or since. And while there are still quite a few strands of lameness clogging up the 1975 year-end list, it's clear that people were starting to get sick of it, and were instead searching for more interesting offerings in the field of R&B, rock, soul, funk, and a budding new genre that went by the name of disco. 75 is right between the legendary 1976 and the infamous 1974, and the music of this year is simultaneously a grim reminder of where it had come from and a shining beacon of where it was going. And I know which of those two gets the view, so without further ado, let's plunge onward into the darkness, my friends. We're counting down.
It's lonely out tonight, and the feeling just got right for a brand new love song. Somebody done somebody wrong song.
Alright, so let's ease right into the number 10 spot on this list by talking about one of the worst songs of the decade.
Having my baby, you're a woman in love and I love what's going through you.
This is You're Having My Baby, a number one hit from 1974 that gave 50s teen idol Paul Anka his first notable success in 15 years. A duet with Odia Coates, or as she's more commonly known, the woman from You're Having My Baby, this song is not only a perfect example of the type of vapid, edgeless schlock that dominated the music scene in the first half of the 70s, but it's also gained a reputation as one of the most saccharine, insipid, and yet somehow also condescending songs of all time.
Having my baby, what a lovely way of saying how much you love me.
Yes, because clearly women only bring children into the world to make their men happy.
Oh, the seed inside you, baby, do you feel it growing?
Eventually I'll get to 1974 on this channel, and I look forward to tearing this song a new one when I do. But you know what they say, you may be able to make one of the worst songs of all time, but sooner or later, you're gonna need a follow-up single.
'Cause you're a one-man woman. You're a one-man woman.
Yeah, it turns out that when your dead career randomly decides to pick up a second wind years later, the knee-jerk reaction is just to do the same thing over and over again. It worked for Santana, it worked for Train, and it worked for Paul Anka, who grabbed onto Odia Coates like a life raft and just kept on pumping out song after song with her, enabling the two to keep stinking up the charts for a good few years after the fact. That being said, their follow-up song One Man Woman isn't anywhere close to as bad as You're Having My Baby. In fact, truth be told, it was kinda hard filling up not just this spot, but the bottom few spots of this list, because while there was an absolute glut of mediocre music in 75, there really wasn't a ton of terribly offensive stuff. This was a very 3.5 out of 10 year for bad music, and yeah, I'd say 3.5 out of 10 is about where we're at for this song. Musically, it's completely nondescript and disposable, with maybe a tiny little bit more energy than its contemporaries if I'm feeling generous. And lyrically, it's just about Paul Anka cheating.
You caught me fooling around with somebody new.
Dick.
You caught me fooling around, now I'm losing you.
So So, yeah, basically Anka describes what an unfaithful jerk-off he's been and how Coates won't put up with it because she's a, quote, one-man woman.
Oh, you're a one-man woman, but I'm a two-time man.
Really, that's just the majority of the song. Basically, all the lyrics are just a bunch of different ways of describing how unfaithful he is. Of course, eventually it does come back around and resolve in a happy ending for everyone, and honestly, that's the part of the song that made me put it on this list. Going back to You're Having My Baby for a second, do you remember how that song displayed this very male-centric version of love? How basically everything the woman did was portrayed as not something she was doing for herself or even for the pair of them, but just because she wanted to make her man as happy as possible? Well, let's just say old habits die hard.
Baby, no, I'm sorry.
Sure, it's the same old story,
I keep coming back.
and I let you, 'cause I'd rather forgive than forget you.
This is the big turning point of the song, and not only does it reveal that this is not the first time this has happened, but every time it does happen, Coates lets him back in because the alternative of forgetting him is just too painful for her. Once again, it doesn't matter what's best for her, it only matters that she can't live without her man.
You lost your way, my love, but now you find.
Now, before we go on, let me make one thing perfectly clear. There's nothing wrong with giving people second chances. We're all human, we all make mistakes, and if someone seems sincerely sorry for their wrongdoings, then yeah, it might be worth giving them an extra chance or two. However, for whatever reason, when Oates says that Anka lost his way but now he's found, I just don't believe her. Maybe it's because his apology is just 6 words long after several verses detailing what a scumbag he's been. Maybe it's just residual disgust from You're Having My Baby. Maybe it's because he basically likens being in a relationship to volunteering to go to prison. Maybe it's just because the two of them are giving really flat performances with no chemistry to speak of. Or maybe it's the fact that they released a sequel to this song where they basically agreed to get over their issues by just banging it out. To disco music.
Make it up to me, love, baby. Make it up to me before the night is over.
Yeah, I think I'm finally starting to understand why it all needed to burn.
Yes, you're a one-man woman. Hey, won't you play another somebody done somebody wrong song?
Which way to Ithaca?
It's not so easy. You must go through Hades, crossing the river Styx.
Oh, this truly is hell!
Up until about a year and a half ago, you could fairly accurately describe my relationship with Styx as someone who didn't know anything about them except for Come Sail Away, which I kinda liked. However, then I watched this video that informed me that apparently you're not allowed to be a music critic if you like Styx. So naturally, I immediately repented for my sins and prayed to the Shadow God for forgiveness. Now, obviously that's just a joke. My taste in music is mine and mine alone, and I'm not afraid to voice an unpopular opinion if I have one. That being said, Todd's video was the first time that I was made aware of the caravan of distaste that Styx seems to have acquired over the years. And with that knowledge in mind, I did go back and re-listen to a bunch of Styx songs, and yeah, they suck. They've got some decent tracks here and there, but for the most part, they're just an utter embarrassment of a band. Styx is all the tropes of 70s prog rock boiled down to their most basic form, trying to be epic and bombastic without any sort of through line to make it flow, and headed by a ridiculous parody of a human being that's basically just a living cartoon character. There is nothing you can get from Styx that you can't get 10 times better from Queen, and let me tell ya, lead singer Dennis DeYoung is no Freddie Mercury.
Lady, when you're with me, I'm smiling.
When I'm with you, I'm smiling.
Lady,
So what's so bad about Lady in particular? After all, the lyrics don't seem that bad. It's just a typical love song, which is pretty subdued for Styx compared to the Levine-esque bad boy posturing of Renegade or the B.O.B.-style lunatic ravings of Come Sail Away or whatever the hell Mr. Roboto was. But like I said, what really bothers me about this song isn't the lyrics. It isn't even DeYoung's ridiculous over-enunciation. No, what bothers me most about this song is the chord structure.
Warning, Sean is about to go all music nerd on this song. This section has been sped up for the benefit of those who don't understand and or care about music theory and only want to hear him make fun of Dennis DeYoung's dumb stupid face. Okay, go.
This song clearly wants to be a grand epic anthem to love because literally everything Styx did was a limb stab at a grand anthem for something. And I'll give them credit, the chords themselves are perfectly fine. Pretty much the entire thing swaps between the main key of the song, D major, and one step down to C major, which creates a nice triumphant swing that fits the whole marching band aesthetic they're going for. However, for reasons I cannot fathom, they decided to add in a syncopated rhythm between the first or tonic note and the minor seventh or subtonic notes on the scale in not just the D major key, but also the C major key, which is baffling. The tonic and subtonic notes on the scale have a natural contrast to each other, and playing them back-to-back creates a simple dissonance with rising and falling tension that centers around the tonic note. Since the tonic of C major is subtonic to the tonic of D major, it's somewhat understandable that you would alternate between these notes in the D major section, although I'd argue that it does unnecessarily blur the clean divide between the two keys. However, by doing the same thing in the C major section, alternating between the tonic C note and the subtonic B flat, you've essentially added hints of C minor into the mix. This in turn distorts the natural chemistry between the D major subtonic and tonic by giving the C its own tonic and subtonic, creating a cluttered sound that makes it far less clear what key is dominant and making the whole thing feel unnecessarily clunky. This could have easily been remedied by changing the B flat to a natural B, thus keeping consistent to the key of D, or simply removing the syncopation altogether, and I can only assume the reason they didn't do that is because that's what you're supposed to do, and Styx is just too brilliant and ahead of their time to adhere to stupid concepts like the fundamental building blocks of music theory that have been in place for hundreds of years. TLDR.
It's a bit too busy sounding for my tastes. Yeah, so as you can tell, I clearly have some fairly deep-seated issues with this song, so why is it so low on the list? Honestly, because it's a pretty spectacular blunder. Say what you will about Styx, but you can't deny their ambition, which is something you'll find is severely lacking in the bad music of this year. On top of that, I can't say that DeYoung's enthusiasm isn't somewhat infectious. He's like a mad scientist tinkering around in his lab, and it's fascinating to watch him work, even if most of his experiments are probably best left chained up in the dungeon.
And make me feel at home while I miss my baby, while I miss my baby.
Okay, let's be honest with ourselves. This guy really shouldn't have had a solo career.
Only you can make this world seem right.
So here's an opinion of mine that I don't think I've ever shared before. Ringo Starr was the least talented member of the Beatles. He contributed the least to the group, and if he weren't a part of it, he never would have made a name for himself on his own merits. Oh boy, it's a good thing I was wearing oven mitts when I said that, otherwise I might have gotten burned by how hot that take was.
And fill my heart with love.
Look, I like Ringo. He seems like a cool guy. He's got a natural charisma around him, and considering that he narrated the first few seasons of Thomas the Tank Engine, he basically owns my childhood. Ah, Thomas the Tank Engine. Just good old-fashioned wholesome entertainment.
He took up the old rails and built a wall in front of him so that Henry couldn't get out of the tunnel anymore. But I think he deserved his punishment. Don't you?
Ah, those were the days.
And you know it don't come easy.
And beyond that, I'd be lying if I said that Ringo didn't have some really solid tracks to his name. It Don't Come Easy was solid, Photograph was one of the only songs with that title that didn't suck. If you look back at his discography, there's some really good stuff in there. However, let's be clear here. Ringo Starr was a member of the most successful and important musical act in modern history, and that fact made him privy to some pretty high-end connections. I don't think it's a coincidence that pretty much all of Ringo's good songs have names like Lennon, Harrison, and Taupin in the writing and production credits. If none of those names are in the inside liner of a Ringo song, then chances are it's either a chintzy trend-hopping song or a cover. The song we have here, Only You, is the latter, being Ringo's take on an old doo-wop standard from the 50s.
And to fill my heart with love for only you.
So here's another opinion I'd like to share with you guys. I prefer the original version to Ringo's. Yes, I believe that the original version by a black group with beautiful, soulful, and passionate voices is superior to the cheap-sounding cover version by a white guy on acoustic guitar years later. Oh geez, the mitts are about to catch fire. We're really putting them through the ringer here.
Only you.
In all seriousness though, I don't think this is really that egregious as far as UB40 and classic R&B songs go, but let's be honest, that's really only because Ringo has such a likable personality. In retrospect, it makes perfect sense that he was picked to narrate a children's show like Thomas the Tank Engine, because he's got this easygoing pleasantness to him that's really soothing. That's not really something that works for this kind of love song, though.
Only you make this world seem right.
Oh yes, because spoken word verses in the 70s have worked a grand total of negative 57 times.
Only you can make my darkness bright.
Look, I get that Ringo's trying to be all sweet and intimate on this song, but really he just sounds like he's falling asleep. He sounds worn out, passionless, and weak, and honestly, that's also my problem with the rest of the song. The guitar sounds like it's being played by a drunk guy sitting under a palm tree, and also, and this is the funniest part, the percussion is basically non-existent. Like, seriously, is he even playing percussion here, or is he just smacking the guitar?
You're my dream come true, my one and only you.
Nothing else to say about this one, really. Just a really lame song by a really great person who's also a really lame artist. You seem like a cool dude, Ringo, but frankly, I'm not too torn up that this was one of your last real hits. And at the very least, we'll always have Thomas, right, buddy?
Shut up!
Aww.
So play for me a sad melody, so sad that it makes everybody cry.
Look, I get that Ringo's trying to be all sweet and intimate on this song, but really he just sounds like he's falling asleep. He sounds worn out, passionless, and weak, and honestly, that's also my problem with the rest of the song. Yeah, you can go too far in the other direction, too.
You are so beautiful. To me.
Yes, just like every rose has its thorns, every tough guy hard rocker needs to take at least one song to show that he's got his sensitive side. And in the 70s, you couldn't get much harder or tougher than Joe Cocker. Well, on the singles charts anyways. Joe Cocker was a singer from England who had several hits throughout the 70s and early 80s. He was an incredibly versatile artist who covered an incredible variety of genres, but pretty much every song he did made use of his trademark husky growl of a voice. And not only did he use it, but he knew how to back it up. Most of his songs have these very powerful, forceful instrumentals that give him a total wall of sound to tear through with his rough, sandpaper-esque voice. Do you see where I'm going with this? Yes, in You Are So Beautiful, Cocker abandons the wall of sound approach and instead goes for a stripped-back piano ballad to demonstrate just how in touch with his emotions he really is, laying it all out on the table to tell his woman exactly how he feels about her. And apparently, the way he feels about her is that she is so beautiful to him. And that's it.
You are so beautiful. To me.
If you want to know what the lyrics to this song are, here are the lyrics to this song. For comparison, here are the lyrics to Changes by XXXTentacion. They have exactly the same number of unique lines.
You're everything I need.
So, let's try to give Mr. Cocker the benefit of the doubt here. Clearly this is intended to be a very intimate, very personal love song. You can tell that from the instrumental, which is just an incredibly naked piano line with a little bit of orchestral swell at the very end. You might think a song like this is an automatic death sentence for a growler like Cocker, but it's not. Things like this have worked before. In fact, Cocker had a softer song in the last retro year I talked about, 1983, and that worked out perfectly fine. So, you see, Cocker can do this. He's clearly capable of being sincere and sentimental, even when keeping the roughness of his voice intact. And indeed, that's what Cocker attempts to do on this song, too. He tries it, and then he breaks.
You're everything I hope for. Everything I need.
Yep, no, that's broken. That man broke himself right there. He is literally breaking his voice on record in order to show how much he's in love with this woman. Seriously, how does he even make it to the end of the song after the... Oh yeah, he doesn't.
You are so beautiful.
I'll be honest, my original instinct was to be way harsher on this song. After all, it physically hurts to listen to, and the writing is such a non-entity that I can't believe there's actually a bit of controversy over who actually wrote this. However, one thing I've learned about myself doing these lists is that I've got kind of a soft spot for what I'm gonna call wounded dog singles. These are songs that are incredibly simplistic, raw, and often ugly sounding, but that's only because the song is essentially a tortured scream, just letting raw emotions flow without filtering or checking them or dressing them up or even trying to make them presentable. A Wounded Dog single is an artist completely opening themselves up and letting themselves be completely vulnerable and raw. And I find that admirable. That's the reason I can appreciate songs like I Fall Apart and EXO Tour Life and, I can't believe I'm saying this, even Robbery by Juice WRLD. You're So Beautiful falls into a similar category. It's just raw emotion bursting out unfiltered, and part of me can't help but appreciate that, so it's not too high on the list. But with that said... yeah.
A real hurting song about a love that's gone wrong. 'Cause I don't want to cry all alone.
Do you ever hear a song and then just get struck by this overwhelming sensation of, why the hell did people buy this?
My eyes have told you. Oh, I never laid a hand on you, my eyes of Georgia.
It's just so lame. It's like a layer cake of lame. You peel back one layer and it's like, ugh, really?
Well, my job is done. I'm not going to be able to put it any better than that, so, can I leave now? Because good lord, do I not want to talk about this.
Carried your books from school, playing make-believe you're married to me.
I mean, say what you will about Joe Cocker's 5-line song and his ridiculous over-the-top singing, at least that was a situation that was worth writing about. I genuinely believe that Cocker was extremely moved by his love for this woman and that he wanted to express that love to her as sincerely as he possibly could. My Eyes Adored You is about a boner this dude had when he was 12.
You were 5th grade, I was 6th when we came to be.
That's literally the entire premise of this song. This dude had a crush on the girl he walked home from middle school with every day. He never did anything with her, he never even told her, and then eventually they grew apart, and he's held on to his crush into his adult life, including now that he's a world-famous pop star. And it was a #1 hit. It was the 5th biggest song of the year. People bought this.
Like a million miles away from me, you couldn't see how I adored you.
Look, I could criticize other aspects of this song, like the overly sappy, if well-orchestrated music, or Frankie Valli's obnoxious nasal squeak of a voice, but the main issue here is that this is a shitty premise for a song. First of all, there's the fact that when you're in 6th grade, any crush that you have means nothing. At that age, your genitals are like a puppy on a leash, hyperactively hopping around, yapping at you to pay attention, and trying to drag you towards anything that smells interesting. Any piece of media that tries to paint a typical middle school crush as anything deep or meaningful is just ridiculous. At best, it's a little cute, and at worst, well, it's middle school. I'll let you fill in the blank on what the worst is. So even if this song were from the point of view of that kid at that time, it would still be pointless, but it's not about that. Instead, this song is about the grown-up Frankie Valli looking back on how special his crush on this girl was at the age of 40.
Funny, I seem to find that no matter how the years unwind, still I reminisce about the girl I miss and the love I left behind.
This is like a 20-year-old writing a song about how he misses his security blanket. It's just so pathetic, and I can't believe that in the midst of the golden age of funk, the American public decided that this should be the #1 hit. This was what they wanted to hear more than anything else. This song never even had the potential to be anything more than cringy and worthless, and literally the only good thing I can say about it is that its success motivated Frankie Valli to get the Four Seasons back together, and by the end of '75, they were making music that sounded like this.
As I remember what a night.
I don't think it was worth it. Well, those were all boring wastes of time. Good God, this year was lame. I mean, there's got to be, like, something more interesting than that. Like, some sort of flavor of terribleness for me to rip on here. Who am I talking about in part 2 again?
You're flying low at a high velocity.
Oh.
You are without a doubt one of the nastiest monsters I've ever seen. And I'm so mad I'm going to tell all my friends how rotten you are. And nobody's going to ever play with you anymore. Nobody's going to even talk to you anymore. That's how mad I am.
Oh, Froggy.
And furthermore, I'm going to tell your mother on you.
Oh, not my
Your
mommy.
mother.